Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
That's a great point.
How generative
What I think
AI
brings us into sharper focus, though,
I know, me too. I'm really excited.
Welcome to Media Planning, where outsmarting, out-adapting, and outperforming never goes out of style. But delivering on all that can weigh on you. Oh, wait, never mind. Looks like all you needed was the right change. Performance with the perfect fit. StackAdapt gives you greater speed, adaptability, and results without all the layers. StackAdapt. Changing is adapting.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the eMarketer Summit, Top Trends for 2025. We're back. I can't believe we get to do this again.
I can believe that they are having you. I'm not so sure about me, but this is the most exciting thing happening in America this week, I think.
Absolutely, Jeremy. I'm so excited we get to do this again, and I'm not surprised that it's together we're doing it. This is Jeremy Goldman, our Senior Director of Client Briefings.
And she is Susie David Canyon, eMarketer's Vice President of Content.
Thank you for joining us today. For those of you new to eMarketer, we are the go-to resource for marketing, advertising, and commerce insights. Our eMarketer subscription includes access to data-rich reports, credible forecasts, analyst insights, and industry benchmarks that validate your strategic decisions. And throughout the day, you'll hear more from many of our analysts who will be sharing some of our insights.
Today, we'll be kicking things off with our keynote, Big Trends to Watch in 2025, with Principal Analyst Sarah Marzano and Senior Analyst Evelyn Mitchell-Wolfe. Afterwards, they'll have a discussion with StackAdapt CMO Ryan Nelson and co-founder and CTO Yang Han.
You'll be seeing us often in between sessions on commerce media, data, CTV, and so much more. We're going to be here to help steer you along and answer your questions live. And we want you to participate. So use the chat window at the top right to submit questions and chat with one another.
By the chat window at the right, you'll also see a menu with overview, speakers, and most important for you today, see next session to easily move on to the next live discussion. There's also tech support for help with any audio or video problems. And now let's get right to it. Over to you, Sarah and Evelyn.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm Sarah Marzano, Principal Analyst at eMarketer. I'm here along with my colleague, Evelyn Mitchell-Wolfe, Senior Analyst.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. We're kicking things off with our keynote, the big trends to watch in 2025. And afterwards, we'll be joined by StackAdapt's Yang Han, co-founder and CTO, and Ryan Nelson, CMO, for a special fireside chat.
All right, let's get into the trends. The first trend that we're going to discuss is around all the activity happening within regulation.
Yes, digital platforms are being heavily scrutinized by regulators from several different angles. Today, we'll talk about antitrust and the responsibility the platforms have to protect kids. So antitrust first, big tech is the primary target of antitrust enforcement, and we consider big tech to include Google, Meta, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft. By 2025, those 5 companies will have more than doubled their share of US digital advertising since we started tracking it in 2008. And big tech is facing 5 active antitrust lawsuits from the US government. The Department of Justice has 2 against Google and 1 against Apple, and the Federal Trade Commission has 1 against Meta and another against Amazon. There may be more coming, dealing with big tech's influence over the burgeoning AI sector, but we'll just have to see. And the presidential election here in the US is right around the corner, and that could change the leadership of those regulatory agencies, which could change the trajectory of where antitrust goes from here.
Yeah, for me, I think one of the most interesting dynamics at play is that it's not just about the US. So even though the companies that we're talking about are based here in the US, because they operate at such a global scale, they're also subject to antitrust regulations in other countries.
Yes, and that means more lawsuits, investigations, fines for big tech, and not just on the antitrust front. Governments around the world are also dialing up the pressure on big tech and smaller online players to protect the kids that use their platforms, like I mentioned. The child safety provisions of the UK's Online Safety Act are expected to be enforceable as of spring of 2025. The EU's Digital Services Act, which has numerous requirements aimed at protecting minors, has been enforceable as of this year. And in the US, Congress is considering two major bills, the Kids Online Safety Act and the Children's and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act, also known as COPPA 2.0. And one or both of those could be passed in 2025, which would present quite the challenge for some of advertisers' most heavily relied upon platforms, including, as you can see here, YouTube, Snapchat, and TikTok, if TikTok isn't banned. So all told, regulation, there's a lot going on, and it is a slow-moving train, but it has the potential to completely reshape the digital landscape as we know it. And 2025 will contain a lot of major milestones for advertisers to pay attention to on this front.
Great, thanks, Evelyn. I know that for our next trend, we're going to look at some of the changes that are impacting and really reshaping the broader search landscape.
Yes, traditional search players like Google are being squeezed in a number of directions. And we have a chart here that illustrates the sheer number of platforms that consumers use for product research.
So I love this chart. I think it really brings the search behaviors into focus. And for me, it's really fascinating to see the way that ad spend really starts to follow those shifts. So the first thing that really stands out to me here is how strong of a representation retail has. Amazon is continuing to come in ahead of search engines as consumers' primary way to begin their product searches. It's worth noting it's been the #1 platform for searches for a number of years now. But then we have Walmart making up a significant share here as well, coming in at #3. I know we're going to take a look specifically at retail media search spending and how that is shaking up the landscape, but I also can't help but notice that the long tail here is really made up of individual social platforms.
Yes. Social networks are at the bottom of the pack here, but there are a couple of things worth noting. The first is that this data reflects the preferences and perceptions of a sample of US adults ages 18 and up, and almost half of the survey's respondents were older than 59. Social search is much more popular among younger consumers, the trendsetters, the heavy social users, but even among the general population, looking at individual platforms obscures broader social search behaviors. So research from IZEA indicates that over 2/3 of US adults are at least somewhat likely to engage in social search during their product research. Now, social search isn't included in our forecast for search ad spending because those dollars typically sit within the social budget, but we do forecast retail media search ad spending and traditional search ad spending with search engines like Google and Bing. And as you can see here, retail media is responsible for virtually all of the growth in the search pie until the end of our forecast period. So Sarah, can you talk a little bit about what is going on within retail media search?
Yeah, absolutely. So search has been a really powerful monetization lever for retailers, and that's in large part because of the ability to help advertisers who are looking to reach high-intent consumers with relevant promoted products. Search ad spend is set to make up nearly 2/3 of the $67 billion in retail media network ad spending that we're forecasting for 2025. And I think something that's very interesting to watch in this space is that retailers are innovating on their search functionality. They're beginning to leverage it as a tool that can serve both lower funnel, high intent shoppers, as well as incorporating functionality that can help facilitate upper funnel discovery. And I think with that, opportunities for monetization are also going to evolve and expand. I think for retailers, the really important focus moving forward is to ensure that monetization opportunities are being balanced with consumer experience, which really needs to be first and foremost as you're iterating on your online experience, right? Balancing your functionality to make sure that consumers are still able to find what they're looking for and that you're balancing efficiency with discovery really thoughtfully so that you don't create friction or erode the trust that you've built with your customers.
a great point. Retailers, please heed Sarah's advice there. So at the same time that retail media is sort of off on a rocket ship where search is concerned, traditional search is slowing to a crawl. Part of that is because Google is the primary player in this segment, and it is so huge that even small growth translates to a hefty amount of incremental search ad spending. But if we remove retailers from the equation, Google also has newer competitive dynamics to be worried about, namely generative AI-powered search. Now, our forecast is not inclusive of newer entrants like Perplexity and SearchGPT, neither of which have fully baked ad products yet. The real story here is how generative search will alter consumer search behavior. So are consumers going to ask more or different types of questions? Are they going to prefer different search platforms for different questions? One thing that we are certain about, though, is that Google's status as the default search engine across most major browsers and devices will help protect its dominance. So Google will still monetize the majority of search traffic among traditional search players for the foreseeable future, unless the pending remedy in the lawsuit against its search business, the antitrust lawsuit, one of the ones that I talked about before, disrupts that default status for Google. All right, so we've talked a lot about Amazon and retail media already. Retail media is a hot topic. So our next trend is focused on the long tail of retail media networks.
Great. So I think it would be a massive understatement if I point out that the last 5 years has seen a considerable amount of evolution and change within the retail media industry. At this point, I say it's harder than ever to find a retailer who doesn't have a retail media network. But one thing that hasn't changed is the share of ad spend on networks beyond the top 2 players. So in 2025, we're expecting just shy of 16% of ad spend on retail media will be allocated across the torso and tail of retail media networks. That's after Amazon takes about 3/4 of spend and Walmart makes up a distant second at 7% of share. And I want to point out that 16% isn't much different than when we looked at the same figures from 2019, when ad spend on retail media networks after Amazon and Walmart made up just over 15% of the market. Now, it's worth noting that we're talking about a similar share of a much larger pie. Total retail media ad spend has grown significantly over the past few years, but so has the number of players. So we're looking at an increasingly crowded and competitive landscape among the long tail of retail media networks.
So it's very crowded there. I think that graphic you have really helps drive that home. What kinds of challenges are arising out of the pressure cooker that exists with so many competitors in that space?
Yeah, so I want to take this from an advertiser's perspective. Advertisers have a number of challenges related to the proliferation of retail media networks. The number one challenge that comes up time and time again is a lack of standardization that makes investing across multiple retail media networks difficult from several angles. The first is executing buys across disparate platforms that have unique ways of doing business. And after that, comparing performance across campaigns is quite difficult. That's because of disparate definitions and a lack of transparency behind the calculations that inform metrics across retail media networks. It makes comparing campaign performance in an apples-to-apples fashion very difficult and quite a resource drain for advertisers. Evelyn, I know you focus on measurement in your world. What are your thoughts on some of the work that industry organizations are doing to address this issue?
Yeah, so I mean, retail media measurement has been a very hot topic since retail media's meteoric ascent in our industry. And the Interactive Advertising Bureau, the IAB, has come together with the Media Rating Council, the MRC, to put together some measurement guidelines for this space. And those are available for anyone that wants to see them. They are very comprehensive, very long document, which is a great resource for advertisers and retailers alike. Adoption of these kinds of standards tends to take a lot of time because there are various incentive structures at work, but we're just talking about the long tail of retail media networks, and those players are heavily incentivized to adopt standards so that they can effectively prove out their value proposition to advertisers so that those advertisers know where to place their next new retail media dollar or where to shift dollars. So we'll see whether there's any meaningful progress in 2025 in regards to adoption of those standards, but it may take more time yet.
Yeah, I think for me, what this all boils down to is that 2025 will be the year we start to see the learnings of the past few years really take effect for the torso and tail. We'll see retail media networks begin to invest in mechanisms that will enable sustainable growth in a difficult competitive landscape. Another element we'll be watching closely in 2025 as it relates to retail media will be development around stores, which is the subject of our next trend. When we talk about the in-store potential for retail media, it's become a common refrain to focus on the disparity between the percent of retail sales that take place in physical stores, which is expected to come in at just under 83% in 2025, against the share of ad spending allocated to digital retail media in physical stores. While we're forecasting ad spend on in-store retail media will exceed $1 billion by 2028, it's important to note that it will still represent less than 1% of overall spending on retail media. So I want to spend some time diving into what's slowing momentum for in-store retail media. To kick us off, and perhaps what we hear most frequently from retailers who are mulling over the opportunity, is that the sheer CapEx investment is a significant barrier. We're talking about what can amount to a really significant hardware investment just to outfit physical stores with the equipment needed to enable bringing digital media into these atmospheres.
Yeah, and just to bring things back to measurement, because I guess I'm always going to come back to measurement, it also introduces complexity regarding cross-media measurement. In-store media, even if it's digital screens, is essentially out of home, and measuring out of home effectiveness is very different to measuring something like a banner ad or a search ad on a retail media's on a retailer's platform. So there is plenty of added complexity there when it comes to measuring the effectiveness of that sort of growing pocket of retail media ad spending.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Measurement is going to be a significant hurdle as we move forward with activating in-store retail media. Something that comes up a lot for me when we talk about this subject is just how diverse the array of potential in-store ad formats are. So looking at this graphic, and there's certainly lots to digest here, but I want to focus on how many different directions in-store retail media can take. On one hand, you have formats like smart shopping carts or scan and shop functionality on mobile devices. These typically require authentication and can serve relevant ads to customers based on what they're scanning and where they are in the store. So we can get pretty precise on measurement here. But on the other end of the spectrum, you have formats like in-store audio. This is a format that can get more sophisticated if you layer it with other formats, but it also lends itself to relatively simple measurement techniques to understand the relative sales lift. Another consideration is the very real possibility that the first dollars spent on digital in-store retail media by endemic brands likely won't be incremental. There's going to be an element of shifting traditional trade budgets that were previously funding things like static end caps to support digital formats. Incremental spend is going to come as the format really proves itself out. But I think this is another element that's going to slow the momentum and progress for in-store retail media.
Sounds like there's a lot of headwinds here. I mean, how do you see this playing out? Like, will anyone be investing in in-store advertising in 2025?
Yeah, I think they certainly will. Here are some things I'll be watching closely. First, I think we're going to continue to see activations across formats that are lower lift, such as in-store audio. So in the past couple months alone, we've seen an announcement from Lowe's and Ahold Delhaize around bringing in-store audio advertising into their physical stores. I'll also be watching demand from non-endemic advertisers for leveraging digital screens in stores. I think this is something that lends themselves really well to the digital out-of-home strategies among these advertisers. They can sort of look at physical stores as just another channel within their portfolio. I'll also be closely watching how in-store solutions like Instacart's Caper Carts catch on with third-party retailers.
Great, lots to pay attention to.
So for our next trend, we'll switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about what's going on with streaming platforms.
Yeah, let's talk about streaming and how platforms are likely to struggle with churn as they dial down content production. So we have a couple of charts here to sort of set the scene for what consumer behavior is driving in this space. So we know that scripted content is going down. We can see this dip in 2020 from when COVID was disrupting production schedules. We also have a dip in 2023 that we know is attributable to the strike that rocked Hollywood for a hot minute there. But production hasn't really bounced back after the strikes. There's less need to watch content on each platform as a result that can justify consumers subscribing to a bunch of subscription platforms long term. From this chart, we know that fewer subscriptions are appealing for a variety of reasons, especially having one single bill to pay attention to. And then we also know that among streaming platforms, Netflix is the stickiest, where more than half of subscribers have kept their subscriptions for over a year compared to all of those other platforms on this list.
So I think one of the main ways streaming services are shifting their strategies, both proactively to boost profitability and also to address any churn risk head on, is by the addition of ad-supported tiers. In addition to being a revenue stream for platforms, for the consumer, it presents a lower cost option in hopes of, again, addressing that churn risk. But what else are streaming platforms doing? Evelyn, you mentioned the motivation of one bill. So I wonder, is bundling a strategy that we can expect to see continue?
Yes, we have seen bundling happen a lot recently. We've been talking about retail media. There are a couple of major players in this space that have sort of bundle-esque options. Amazon obviously has its Amazon Prime Video offering, which recently launched, or at the beginning of this year, launched an ad-supported tier. Amazon also recently partnered with Apple TV Plus to offer some of that content on their service. And Walmart also has, with their Walmart Plus membership, a Paramount Plus sort of offering where Walmart Plus members get access to Paramount's ad-supported offering. So there's a lot of bundling going on. And we'll continue to see more of that next year. Some of the challenges that can arise with that strategy, though, is that consumers may not actually know where they have a subscription. They might not know that they have access to a platform. So whether a subscriber actually translates to time spent with the platform is sort of up in the air. And for advertisers, of course, consumers actually spending time watching the platform translates to ad opportunities. So there are definitely considerations to be had there. Another strategy that these platforms are taking is to produce more unscripted content, which tends to be cheaper than scripted content. That might not actually be as much of a draw as those platforms are hoping, because consumers might not have as much of an appetite for professionally produced unscripted content, because they can get plenty of that kind of content without a subscription fee on their social platforms, which leads to our next trend on how creators are taking advantage of this situation.
All right, excellent. Yes, as we move into our final trend, we'll take a look at social video, which we know is extraordinarily popular. We have some user figures that put that into perspective as we'll look at how creators are poised to take advantage of the fragmented video landscape. So to set the scene here with our first data, we're sitting at a very interesting inflection point. We're heading into a future where there will be more social network users and more YouTube viewers than there are linear TV viewers. We also are heading into a point where time spent on linear TV is declining while time spent on social platforms is increasing. Evelyn, you pointed out that time spent on video platforms equals more ad inventory. So we're expecting to see the ad spend will follow these trends closely.
Yes, and creators, for their part, are really fueling this trend, contributing the content that consumers are voraciously watching. And some have even started producing episodic content to keep users coming back for more, encourage binge watching kind of behaviors, which in turn increases time spent even more. So what does this mean for advertisers, Sarah?
Yeah, I think at the most base level, now is the time for advertisers to seriously consider diversifying their video strategy by partnering with creators on these platforms. And we absolutely can't move away from this trend without touching on the incredible power of creators to influence purchases. So I want to pull up some data here on a survey where we asked consumers who had made a social content influenced purchase about who had produced the content that inspired them. Creators were overwhelmingly the top choice, ahead of brands, retailers, and peers. So there's a massive commerce opportunity to be unlocked here as well by leveraging creator partnerships in commerce. And in my world, as the focus on incrementality within retail media continues, I expect retailers to lean into this in a big way in 2025.
Excellent. Bringing it full circle. Love it. All right. So that's it for the keynote content. Let's bring StackAdapt's Yang Han, co-founder and CTO, and Ryan Nelson, CMO, into the discussion.
Yeah, Ryan, Yang, pleasure to have you with us.
Hey, thanks for having us today. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure to be here.
So we just covered a lot of ground. I'm curious, which of our trends jumped out the most at you?
I can start first. I find the decline of traditional search particularly interesting to me and also really relatable. When I try to do a search online these days, I tend to get results from 7 to 10 years ago. So most of the time, I find myself pressing on the tools button and customizing the time window to be in the past year, which is a bit of a hidden feature in Google search. It's not obvious, but it has become very necessary. And I think as the internet has gotten larger, there is a lot more data out there. So search algorithms have struggled to keep up with relevancy, and the concept of personalization isn't there at all compared to social media. So the way Google search responds with results hasn't evolved as well. They try to emulate a bit of answers from formats like ChatGPT, but it's nowhere close to the value due to their fear of like search ad cannibalization. I think a dramatic change to the concept of search is needed to survive in the long run, but Google also can't afford to take that risk. And so what you see is a steady decline while they try to prop up other services such as YouTube to hedge around that, but also not compete directly against it as well.
I'd say I think just definitely the pace of innovation, and just exciting to see we're seeing the same trend as well in terms of retail media and CTV and just the growth overall, even on our platform. So great to see that and just aligned with what you're thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I feel like retail media and CTV, those have been hot topics for a couple of years now. They are one of the most searched terms on our website at eMarketer. I think though search is sort of an interesting trend because for so long it was sort of kind of stagnant, right? Google was the top dog in search and nothing really, I mean, there was a little bit more automation in this space. But back in 2022, I wrote a search report that I mean, it was like pulling teeth to get people to talk to me about it. And now everyone wants to talk about search, which is really fun. So I'm excited to see how the whole space evolves throughout 2025. But let's actually talk a little bit more about retail media. So what were your thoughts on the trends that we presented on retail media?
Yeah, so starting with, why retail media has gained so much prominence as opposed to search, if you look at search itself, it has to be contextually accurate and it lacks intelligence with respect to personal customization. That's where social media and retail media shine because by nature, they can use recent data on what you've consumed. And so the products they show you are a lot more personalized out of the box. And it's only going to get smarter over time with the continuous growth of AI and data. These platforms also have the benefit of using both what we call push-based strategies and also pull-based strategies. So in the push-based environment, you have proactive messages such as ads, emails, AI agents now that can show you a product at the right time and allow for that serendipitous discovery for consumers. So you can show people a product right before they realize they need it. And they also have access to traditional pull environments such as their own search capabilities where a user already knows they want something, but you can then further utilize personalization to make the results more relevant and provide an even better experience. So with social and retail platforms emerging, consumers will have a lot more avenues to discover relevant products in personalized ways they haven't encountered before.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned AI because I think that it's sort of unique that we didn't spend a lot of time discussing that within our trends. What do you think will be an AI breakthrough that really reshapes the way advertisers operate in the next 1 to 2 years?
Yeah, obviously, generative AI is a major topic. I think it's already playing a major role improving efficiencies across the board, such as creative enhancement, A/B testing, producing knowledge and insights, and just reducing a lot more manual work in general. And on our end, we've noticed a trend of clients needing and wanting to spend less time setting up and managing marketing campaigns over the years, and they want AI to play a bigger role to help them. I think the major leap in the next few years is when we figure out how to have predictive AI and generative AI interact together to produce that end-to-end value exchange where we haven't seen before. So for example, imagine we have generative AI automatically being able to utilize predictive AI tools for ad targeting and 360 optimization, so it can learn on its own, improve on its own with human-based guidance. So traditional predictive AI always lacked that human component and understanding of the context, and generative AI can help bridge that gap and leverage a series of AI tools for you, essentially.
I mean, I'm really, especially in the programmatic space, looking forward to seeing how AI unfolds. And speaking of how AI unfolds, Ryan, you've recently joined StackAdapt as CMO, and I'm curious, with so many opportunities to innovate in AI and outside of it, where are you and your team focused right now when it comes to digital and offline marketing strategies?
Yeah, I think just following up on Yang, he mentioned value, and I think at the end of the day, I've been in the company now 4.5 months. I've been incredibly grateful to be here, just to see the pace of innovation and excitement in this great industry, but also all the movement we're making as a company. And I think about starting with the customer, where are they at? Where's the value that we can go provide from a technology standpoint, from a people standpoint, and a partnership standpoint? And so as I think about kind of zooming out, marketing is really about helping the world know who you are as a brand, what do you stand for, and ultimately, kind of at the end of the day, why they should purchase your products or partner with you. And so as I think about where I'm focused as a team is really just getting in close with our clients and partners, understanding where we can add value at each opportunity, whether that is through partnering with Yang's team on new technology and tools, or working with our creative studio to be able to help bring world-class ads to the world. It's just been really, really fun to see. And so I think at the end of the day, all of us as marketers, and it's fun to be a marketer, marketing to marketers as a company. So, and knowing this world and kind of the world that we all go through. So I have a lot of empathy for each of you listening today, but also just really grateful for the future in terms of AI and technology and all that's going to bring.
Absolutely. We are facing a tidal wave of new channels, new tech, new tools. So what would your advice be to marketers on how to prioritize what will actually move the needle for them from a marketer to a marketer?
I definitely focus where your audience is. So focus where what's working. Obviously, we're doing a lot of A/B testing. I'm sure you're all doing that as well. Don't add a new channel unless there's data to back it up. But obviously, test, iterate. That 5% tests. I love those. And then be able to kind of just pour more fuel on the fire. I think there's a lot of power in making sure you're using the technology that you're using today fully to its full extent. I'm not a big believer in getting new tech just to get new tech. And so, but there's also a lot of efficiencies that are happening as it relates to all the new tools and technology coming out that are making our jobs easier. And so to write content or to generate ideas in bigger ways, and then taking that and making a human element with your team as well. So definitely the tidal wave is here. It's fun to see. I think there's a lot, I'd say this, the UI and UX right now is very chat focused, the chat GPTs of the world. And we're asking a question, we're getting things back. I'm excited for a year, 2, 3 years from today, where there's other modes and modalities of interacting with AI that's not just text-based. And so that's exciting to see as well.
So we spent a fair amount of time during our conversation talking about some of the measurement challenges within retail media. And I think with that, advertisers are often faced with a slew of recommendations and things they're being instructed that they must do in order to succeed. I want to flip the script on that a little bit, Yang, and ask you what one thing that you think marketers should avoid doing in order to successfully run and measure campaigns.
Yeah, I would say in general, you want to avoid running campaigns on limited channels and avoid measurements that are not cross-device. So people consume multiple mediums, such as the browser, mobile app, connected TV, and they walk past digital billboards all the time. So you want to be able to leverage multiple channels as much as possible to get their attention. This year, we've seen a 24% increase in clients setting up multiple channels, multi-channel strategies compared to last year, and a 75% increase in clients setting up all 7 channels that we offer. So marketers are increasingly seeing value in a multi-channel strategy. And then when it comes to measurement, you want to avoid measurements that can only occur on a single device that looks at a very narrow KPI. Classic example would be Google Analytics, which is last click based on your browser. It can't account for your mobile actions, your connected TV views, and so forth. And the world has evolved to be multi-device, but many technologies haven't kept up with those changes in consumer behavior. So ideally, you have enough budget and time to run incremental experiments and measure longer-term attribution windows rather than focus on a narrow short-term KPI, which can quite frankly be gamified by certain platforms as well.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I feel like we have more visibility than ever before that proves out the fact that the purchase funnel is absolutely not linear. So it's more important than ever before for advertisers to really recognize that and make sure they're meeting consumers where they are, which requires accepting a certain degree of complexity, right? As you navigate through how to activate across platforms and channels in order to do that.
Speaking also of gamification that you mentioned, I am our resident programmatic analyst here, and so I spend a lot of time focusing on the programmatic space. And there has been a lot of discussion around the gamification of metrics and viewability and made for advertising sites. So there's a lot going on there. But I'd love to focus in on programmatic and ask about how marketers should go about scaling their programmatic budgets and what the biggest technological bottlenecks that you can see coming, how advertisers should think about those in order to overcome them.
Yeah, I think the biggest bottleneck and challenges in the programmatic industry arises from the industry fragmentation we're seeing and the complexity that emerges from it. Well, programmatic itself makes little sense. Being able to transact in real time between the buy side and the sell side. But a lot of players have gotten into the space trying to add their own value and has made the ecosystem extremely complex where the end marketer no longer easily understands what is actually happening behind the scenes and what value is truly being delivered. I think solutions will have to evolve to help customers shift through this complexity and build true technology value from the ground up that can reduce reliance on a long tail of inefficient providers that try to add on top of this ecosystem and just make it a lot more confusing for users to navigate.
So we touched briefly on AI, which is a topic that we certainly comes to the top of conversations quite frequently lately. But data is really the fuel that powers it. So I'm curious how you see the relationship between data and AI evolving, especially as we're moving into a world with more restrictions around data collection.
Yeah, I think industry and privacy frameworks will continue to evolve to provide best practices on how companies can handle their data and utilize the AI on top of it. AI ultimately does require data to thrive, but to create healthy AI, you need to feed it with healthy and legally sourced data. So consumers need to know how and when their data is used. First party data is always going to be a key component of any data strategy, but it needs to be sourced in the right way. And I think third party data also continues to play a key role, but it can be watered down due to the privacy regulations. And that's where you also need AI to step in to become more intelligent, to make inferences based on less deterministic data out there. But there is a lot of innovative ways in which can utilize both third-party and first-party data together to really make sure you have a truly intelligent solution as well.
Yeah, and I'd say it's fun to see the evolution of data. Sometimes there's too much data, I feel like, in our lives. Sometimes there's not enough data, and the technology now available where we actually don't have enough data for the models to be able to run at the pace they want to. And so maybe the first time in history that's been the case as it relates to technology ahead of pace of what the data is. And so exciting to see as mountains and mountains of data get created, technology be able to ingest that and make action and measurement out of it.
So Ryan, on metrics, I think we hear so much about ROI, but what's one metric that marketers often overlook that you think could actually make or break their success going into 2025?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think every business is different, but I think at the end of the day, customer lifetime value is a really important one that I think often is overlooked as a marketer because oftentimes we're thinking about the early funnel and like how do you drive awareness or brand a lift. And at the end of the day, we want customers to love us and stick around for a long term. And so I always try to talk to my team about what's the end-to-end journey look like? What's that funnel look like in a B2B company scenario? And helping at each touch point along that journey. And so customer lifetime value is one I'd look to. Also engagement, I think. What are you doing to drive engagement in the world as it relates to your content, your thought leadership, the brand voice and your tone? How are you showing up to the world across your different channels? And how do you want the world to see you? And I think A lot of times we kind of go fight for clicks and other things. And I think at the end of the day, conversions are really important. One of the things I think about as a company of kind of narrowing down what we do, and I love simplicity in messaging. And I was kind of thinking through the other day of like, really this space is really about connecting advertisers to audiences, is what we're really trying to do as a brand. We're trying to help create buyers and brands, and then kind of campaigns and conversions. And so this alliteration of the ABCs, I think, is a fun thing of ultimately connecting advertisers to audiences, buyers to brands, and campaigns to conversions in a powerful way. And that's what we're trying to do at StackAdapt. I'm excited to be part of this journey. So we really appreciate you having us today.
All right, well, that is all the time we have. Thanks again, Yang and Ryan, for joining us.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Back to you, Susie and Jeremy.
Thanks so much, Sarah, Evelyn, Ryan, and Yang. We're back, and we have a special guest with us, Ethan Kramer-Flood, eMarketer's principal forecasting writer.
Hello, hello. I am psyched to be here. The trends are washing over me. I feel like I got 2025 locked down already.
Oh my God,
Let's do
so
this.
exciting.
Okay, nobody bring Ethan more coffee, okay? He's ready to go. And don't worry if you've joined us late. All of today's sessions will be available on demand after today's broadcast. We've gotten some really great questions coming in already, guys. So how about, this might be a good one to start with, does bundling lead to mergers and acquisitions eventually? I have a thought on this, but I'm gonna shut up. And what do you think?
I want to hear your thoughts. I want to, we're all sharing here. I think yes. And I also think hopefully, frankly, I think probably all consumers think hopefully, because that simplifies our bills and it makes it easier to choose. And there's a proliferation and the market is too crowded and there's too many streaming services and we would like to have access to them. So if the scenario that the question refers to is some notion where we all start to bundle anyway, and we're getting used to receiving these things all sort of at the same time, is that going to lead to M&As? Yeah, maybe. Not for the leading ones, right? Netflix is not going to have anything to do with this, but we've heard these whispers for services like Paramount and Warner Brothers, Max, maybe, that are struggling a little bit, and these kinds of discussions happen in the background, and I think that's a great solution.
Well, Comcast, we covered for our clients yesterday. They were asked about it, and they actually they were open to it. And a number of other things to transform their business, but especially if you're not considered to be necessarily a top tier streamer, and they're all they all have great content, but it's really expensive to run this type of business, right?
Well, the question is, how many streaming services do you all belong to?
Not that many, but there are a few that haven't done the password sharing crackdown yet. So the amount that I have access to is a little higher than the amount that I pay. I actually don't pay for very
this
many.
is being recorded, right? Yeah.
Man, wait, the cameras are on. And yeah, so we all have right? we have our favorites that we pay for. We've got the other ones that maybe you're willing to watch ads on. You save a little money on that. You've got the ones that maybe you're not paying for. Maybe you're stealing a password. Maybe you just don't have it. I'm sure they would love to find a scenario where where we all subscribe to all the major ones. But
it almost feels like we're going back to cable and the original sort of how you paid a lump sum and got access to everything.
And maybe we will end up there. Some of us, I don't know, does anyone at the table still pay for cable? Because I do.
No, but I have Spectrum in New York. There's like the Spectrum app where you can get Hallmark, which is maybe my favorite, and a bunch of other news channels, but it's not the cable ones.
So we spend a lot of time tracking the decline of pay TV, traditional sort of linear pay TV, and then also the gradual rise of digital pay TV, which is not making up for the loss.
Yeah.
But it has occurred to me that even though we all complain about the proliferation of streaming services and how much they cost and what that does to our wallet, it still is not really that much for those of us that are still paying for cable. If I and others just stop paying for cable, actually, we could afford, you could get almost all these streaming services, particularly with the bundles, and not be paying any more than you were 10 years ago.
Now, is your cable bundled with Wi-Fi? Because
Yes.
I feel like that's the thing too, right? Bundling, bundling is the way to go. When I first read the question that was coming in, I also thought about it from a retailer. We talked about Walmart and Paramount, Walmart Plus and Paramount. So like, is there going to be M&A activity across different industries too, from a bundling perspective?
By the way, that's a really interesting one, because obviously Walmart, the Vizio acquisition, right? That deal, if you see across a lot of different industries, you wind up seeing more and more integration, across different parts of the funnel. And you've had a lot of growth in one area, and then you have to move into other areas. So it just kind of logically makes sense. So it's not like we're necessarily making any predictions, but we actually got another question, by the way, about that topic, generally speaking. Just the idea about like bundling, who benefits the most? Is it the commerce and advertising side of the business or the subscription business? Do either of you have perspectives? Because I think the consumer, obviously, as you were pointing to, I think is one of the biggest winners there.
Yeah, they see it as a panacea solution. And I think Evelyn or Sarah spoke to this a little bit during their portion in terms of concern about churn, right? So when you have the bundle, that addresses that. You're less likely to have people just sort of on a whim cancel, which is going to become even more of a danger now that with the new regulatory mandates for click to cancel, it's going to become very easy for all of us to we finish our show, we cancel it like a minute later. Right? So with bundling, you're less likely to do that. But also what they're doing with these bundles for the most part is directing people into the ad tiers. So they want you to both get a little bit more sticky with them, and they want you to take the cheaper option, because then they're going to be delivering ads. The whole bundle is going to be delivering ads on its different streaming services.
And they're
going
to make money from other people too, in addition to us.
Yes, not just the three of us.
Yeah. I meant from advertisers. But it's interesting because we're in the season of doing our 2025 trend collection. And so on the retail front, we're even talking about it as a commerce. What are some of the other, and I'm giving it away a little bit, so I don't know if my team will be annoyed, but what are some of the other industries? It's not just streaming, right? From a commerce perspective, if you don't have the right, everyone's competing with Amazon Prime, right? So if you think about all the services that they offer, what are the things that a Walmart Plus or Costco, like what are the different types of things that commerce membership programs need to offer to create that sticky factor?
That's I know. I
look forward to reading that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know what it is.
I can probably log on to our intranet and figure it out early. But no, I like to be excited when the reports actually come out. I mean, it is one of those things where if you think about like, why does Amazon, right? Like we actually pulled this up a few minutes ago. How much does Amazon spend on their entertainment content? For 2024, we actually have that number. It's over $22 billion, right?
Huge number.
And why do you spend the money on that? I mean, first off, obviously, like it fuels Prime. It gets people to sign up for that. And then because people signed up for that, then they've got more data, more transaction history. You can sell that obviously to advertisers, but also how often are you just watching TV and then you open up the Amazon app because you're on Prime and you're thinking about it. So it's keeping you in that ecosystem.
That's such a good point, right? Because if you have, it's kind of like a retailer. If you have individual content, then they're going to come to you and watch it or buy it from you. And then with all the shoppable media stuff that's happening, right? So Amazon has figured out a way to have you come and watch content with them, to then service you ads, because now most people are not coughing up the extra money to have ad lists. So now you're watching the ads, so they're making money like that. There's a lot of shoppable media content. So now you're buying something and they're getting more data about you. And then they're using that data to monetize it for their retail media network. So it's really brilliant.
And all of it works together to be sticky.
Yes.
It's like Amazon has their own internal bundle because none of us necessarily want to lose access to. There's at least something there you don't want to lose access to. So you end up keeping it. It's something like Prime Video that not that long ago was almost an afterthought of a benefit to the Prime membership, now has become a significant part of why the whole thing is sticky. And they're spending $20 billion. They spend more on their content than a lot of the more established media entertainment platforms.
To some degree, you almost have to spend that much when you're building that market, right?
But I've noticed that they're starting to send emails to other things that they offer, right? Like I'm getting a lot about the photos, and I wonder if they're still figuring out a way to make everything super sticky so that they collect more data.
I just got a benefit on my food delivery app.
Oh yeah, the Grubhub.
They alerted everyone to that. The free photo sharing. I mean, they're good at this, and it's the nature of what that business is that they can do this. That's not necessarily something that a lot of their competitors can emulate.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, if you're thinking about, obviously, one of the things that we covered for clients this year was, Paramount and what's going to happen to that. And obviously, we know to some degree of like the direction that that business, had to move in to maintain viability. But then you think about like Warner Brothers Discovery and all the different moves that they've made with their pretty significant debt load still. And it just seems like it's going to be harder and harder for some legacy players to modernize, if you will, and get that moment in the sun again. I mean, maybe it's like, do you think that that ship has sailed based off of the forecast that you've written up for us?
Well, in more sort of qualitatively, it seems like a doom cycle when you have to reduce your spending on content because you're in financial trouble while you're simultaneously trying to rescue these services that are heading in the wrong direction. And then in 2025 and 2026, you're going to have less to draw people in, which is, I mean, this kind of brings us back to the original question about mergers and acquisitions being the solution to this.
Yeah. I'm going to move us to the next question, which I find fascinating. Have you guys looked at trends, and probably this one's for you too, Ethan, have you looked at trends in online gaming and how brands might be subtly, although I'm going to add not so subtly, getting in front of gamers?
So we look at it from the perspective of forecasting, our bread and butter, right? So that's I'm the principal forecasting writer. So for something like this, we just look at the data, and we project both total number of gamers in the U.S. and in lots of countries and all over the world. I think we have a collective figure, and then we look at digital ad spending ad spending on digital games. Which is a significant growth area. It is still somewhat smaller as a category than some of the other things that we talk about all the time. Retail media spending, it came up a lot today. CTV ad spending. There's a lot of stuff. Search obviously is much, much bigger, and social is much bigger. But it's coming along pretty well. Yeah. It is overwhelmingly mobile gaming that this still happens in, right? You do see some headlines every once in a while about ads trying to seep into the big AAA kind of console games, and whether or not that works and whether or not that's welcome. That's still kind of a small slice of the pie. But big slice is mobile.
Sorry to cut you off. I was just going to say, I found it really interesting, and I know that there's kind of like a question of like things like Roblox and Fortnite.
I mean, I might be a gamer, so.
Are you a gamer?
Yes. I mean, Words with Friends counts. Wordle.
Okay, fine.
All these ones count. And then I play.
I thought you were more of like
I
a
play
Call
Roblox
of Duty
with my
kind of
nephew.
person.
It's very hard. I find it really hard, Roblox, but I play with my nephew.
So there have been a lot of really interesting like brand activations that might not be captured in our forecast because they're not necessarily always like advertising plays. I think that there's certainly a lot of people who gravitate towards gaming, and it's a great way of getting in front of like younger consumers who are statistically likely to stick around longer. You can get some loyalty with them. But it's amazing when I look at like our forecasts and you see like mobile gaming ad revenues to non-mobile, it's like a 9-to-1 ratio in favor of mobile. So it's
well, and the thing is, like, are you counting like the skins and stuff in that? I don't know the definition exactly, but what I do know from a consumer retail perspective, there's like the Words with Friends where we're serviced ads that are everywhere all the time, and sometimes even things we've already bought. So like there's that not so subtle ad, and then in Roblox there are lots of retailers and brands that are doing activations like sneakers or like their own little store, which doesn't feel like advertising because you're using Roblox money to buy something that's Gucci branded maybe, but you're also helping from a branding perspective. So a different sort of subtle advertising.
Man, I got to get into Roblox so I can understand the ecosystem better. Who knew that I was missing out?
There's so much. I mean, IKEA did this whole, oh my God, IKEA did this whole thing around like that you can hire people in Roblox to be IKEA associates for, I think it was a week, and you submitted your resume. I mean, a lot of it is fanfare, PR sort of activations that kind of count like advertising.
By the way, since we've had a bunch of great questions, keep them coming. And if anybody wants to write their Roblox user ID in the comments, you can hit me up and we'll.
We got to talk about something else. There's too much free advertising for Roblox.
It's very fair. Fortnite's pretty.
This is not a sponsor.
Fortnite's pretty great too. But here's a good one. Retail media networks, since obviously that was such a core component of what we just talked about. How do you standardize retail media network measurement when some retailers sell bananas and others sell computers? Because I know Sarah talked about that a lot. I think it's really hard, Susie, but I know you have the solution. So
I mean, I wish I did, right? I wish I had the solution. We talk about this obviously a ton at work. There are so many different ways of thinking about how do you standardize. And I think it really starts, and Sarah and Evelyn talked about it, like what are the KPIs that really help you understand that you're driving incremental growth? And so I think part of the problem, from my understanding, is that Amazon huge, Walmart next huge, and then after we saw that, like that fun pie graph with all of the pie chart with all of the logos, the long tail is so long so that the competition is so stiff with Amazon and Walmart, and there isn't as much sort of in it for Amazon to try and figure out how do you standardize so that you can compare how your dollars are doing with me versus someone else. And so I think until we can solve for a retailer understanding why it's important and that they are going to be losing advertising dollars if they don't start helping an advertiser see how it's going, the standardization part will be hard.
I was just looking at some really good data in our database that Quartile put together that just said essentially in the US, agency and marketing decision makers who are looking to increase their future investment in retail media, and everything is tied to I need a better way of tracking ROAS, ROI. I have to measure the upper funnel impact a lot more. There's an incentive certainly at a certain point to try to standardize some of these things just so that people have overall confidence in the system. And I know you covered a lot of global markets, and I feel like there's different markets that there's always hurdles to turning them into major advertising markets, right?
It's the complexity of it. So I think the trend that we're anticipating, if I remember correctly how they framed it, is that in 2025, a lot of this stuff is going to sort of come to a head, but not necessarily get solved. Right? I mean, this is the resolution. I think Susan laid out the reasons, right? This is not something that is just they're going to be able to flip a switch and we're going to get an answer to this. But instead of kind of brushing on it hasn't yet risen to a level of this is a top issue that is going to be kind of confronting everyone all the time.
It might.
This next year it will be.
Next year it'll definitely be, because now, as we were talking about before, when we were watching the keynote, is that there is the umbrella term, which is commerce media, that has lots of different industries that are also selling ad space and using their own data. So there might even need to be more standardized across the different industries, like financial media, travel media, so that then, whatever that brand is, they understand exactly where they want to be to reach the right customers. That, I think, is where it'll become most critical.
And we are hard at work trying to forecast all of those.
Yes, I know,
and
we're very
We've got
excited.
Debut stuff coming. Some of it just came out. Some of it's about to come out. This stuff is even more nascent, so they're probably even further from sort of resolving these questions, since they're just even beginning the process of becoming significant.
But as a brand or an advertiser, as a buyer, you're going to want everybody to sort of think through the KPIs in the same way, so that then you can make a better educated choice where your dollars go.
There was, I know you had, we were talking a little bit when we were off camera about AI search and how that's a major thing that you're very excited about, right?
So many of the trends that they discussed were related to search and the evolution of search. And yesterday ChatGPT debuted the big Google killer, right? And whether we don't have time to get into all of our opinions as to whether or not this is going to be successful or not, but it's really coming, and it's going to be super interesting to play out. I personally don't think it is going to be a Google killer. I think that Google will successfully emulate anything that ChatGPT does better, and that Gemini will just end up being like a duplicate experience for free, and that things will keep going. But this is going to be really fun to watch.
I totally agree, especially because we have the habit of going to Google to search and to find a plethora of information. So getting me to go to a different platform is going to be really hard.
What's that song? Anything you can do, I can do better. Google has a very strong profit motive to get
I can just copy you.
Yeah.
So, that was really great, Ethan. Thank you so much for joining us. And next up, we have our first analyst-led panel of the day, and Sarah Marzano is back. Join Sarah for a Commerce Media's Moment, navigating new channels to drive sales, by clicking on Next Session above the chat on your right. If you have any issues, you might need to refresh your browser after you join the session. We'll see you there.